Bring out the talent.
Bring out the talent.
Bring out the talent.
Welcome to Bring Out the Talent, a podcast featuring learning and development experts discussing innovative approaches and industry insights. Tune in to hear our talent help develop yours. Now here are your hosts, TTA's CEO and President Maria Melfa and Talent Manager Jocelyn Allen.
I just noticed David's very cool shirt today.
And the cool moves he busted out because he was feeling
cool
it between the music and the shirt. We got a great version of David happening.
Go on.
Did you have that shirt on this morning? Because this is our second podcast.
No, he totally didn't.
I did a wardrobe change. I got to mix it up, right?
Very impressive. That's a really, really cool.
I think that should be David's thing. He has wardrobe changes that people will never see.
Oh, I thought you were going to say my thing is being cool. I was going to say yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, of course. But I think you should have wardrobe changes throughout the episode. So we'd like to see at least 3 or 4.
Don't look at. He's looking around, see what he can do. He's ready.
Trying to remember where I put my evening gown.
Yeah, better go for
nice.
The dry cleaners, David. You made a mess last time.
Very nice. Well, we are having fun and laughing, but we are talking about a very serious topic. But our very serious topic actually could be helped by laughing.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, for sure.
So let's get started. Anxiety has become a very pervasive issue, especially among younger generations. In fact, according to the American Psychological Association, nearly 62% of millennials report feeling overwhelmed by stress, and Gen Zers are not far behind at 59%. These statistics highlight the pressing need to address mental health challenges in our workplace and communities. In this episode of Bring Out the Talent, we welcome Dr. Lauren Cook, author of the book Generation Anxiety, a Millennial and Gen Z Guide to Staying Afloat in an Uncertain World. Dr. Cook is a therapist, consultant, speaker, and author who specializes in helping individuals and organizations improve their mental wellness. Dr. Cook's passion for mental health spans all ages and identities with a particular focus on workplace well-being. Today, Dr. Cook will discuss the unique stressors facing millennials and Gen Zers, the impact of anxiety on learning and productivity, and practical strategies for creating supportive workplace environments. If you are looking to foster a more supportive and productive workplace, today's discussion is filled with invaluable insights and actionable takeaways. Welcome, Dr. Cook.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a fun dance party that we started off with.
You had some good moves there.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, right. One of my favorite moves, the rolling of the hands and swaying side to side. Yeah, the music just makes you move. Makes you move.
It does make you move.
We're so excited to have you here, Dr. Lauren. And as we were joking, not joking in the beginning, our defense mechanism is absolutely humor. So we were playfully saying that this is a great episode for us to participate in because, boy, do we know a thing or two about anxiety. But in all seriousness, this is something that everybody has awareness on. It isn't whether you are somebody who suffers from it, if that's not the right word, pardon me, but somebody who has anxiety, somebody who knows somebody with it, or if you are in an organization who knows how important it is to talk about mental health and wellness and what anxiety contributes to a person's professional development, then we know that it is rampant in today's society. So we loved your book. Generation Anxiety, a Millennial and Gen Z Guide to Staying Afloat in an Uncertain World. I mean, say less, right? Like you nailed it. In your book, you mentioned that millennials and Gen Zers specifically are among the most anxious generations in history. I'm a millennial here, so just speaking from experience. But can you elaborate on some of the unique stressors that these particular generations face and how they differ from previous generations? Why are we talking so much about millennials and Gen Z as related to other generations?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned earlier, is suffering the right word when it comes to anxiety? And I would say it absolutely is. Anxiety it feels so commonplace to folks that people almost brush it off like, well, doesn't everybody have anxiety? Isn't it like the common cold? But it really is a form of suffering for those who are struggling with it. And we are seeing for millennials and Gen Z in particular, it's been going through the roof, both in prevalence, the amount of people experiencing it, and severity, the intensity of those symptoms. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons for why this is, both societally and individually. You look at something like the generational power index, and I talk about this a lot in the book. It's interesting. You ask previous generations, what has been the most significant generational event in your lifetime? And what do you think, like silent generation, Gen X, baby boomers, what do you think they say? Any guess? 9/11.
9/11. Okay, I was going to say.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Even the silent generation put 9/11 even before World War II. I found that fascinating in the
Yeah.
research.
Mhm.
But then you look at what Gen Z has experienced in their short lifetime, and it's a laundry list. Like, it's the last few elections we've had, it's climate change, it's gun violence, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement. I mean, it's endless, the litany of things that have happened in these last 2 decades. And especially something like gun violence, people feel very afraid day to day. 75% of young adults report that they feel unsafe in the United States every single day. That's from the Stress in America survey done by the American Psychological Association. That's going to take a toll on us psychologically if we're constantly hypervigilant every time we go into a grocery store or a concert or a movie theater. A lot of my clients will tell you they won't even go to the movie theater anymore for that reason, or they won't go to concerts for that reason. And then, of course, social media, I think it's a given at this point. It's become the low-hanging fruit, but it absolutely needs to be said for how that is affecting people's mental health as well. Just the comparison, the body dysmorphia that's coming from that, the highlight reel, all of those things are affecting people's mental health. So you factor in all of these different things, and I don't think it's too shocking why we're seeing so much more anxiety.
Absolutely. I think social media is the biggest
Yep.
impact on all of this. I really do. It just doesn't make sense when we see the rise of anxiety and how much it has grown over the last couple decades. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. There's
Now
so
it's
many.
commonplace. I don't think there's an employee here that doesn't talk about the high anxiety that their children have. And it's a day-to-day struggle with everybody.
And it's become an addiction, right? Where
Mhm.
even young adults will tell you they don't like it. All of my clients say, I don't like Snapchat. I don't like TikTok, but I can't stop. And
Yeah.
so that's where, and I'm a new mom myself. I think that's where, as parents, like we've really got to have some conversations about setting boundaries here, because the kids themselves will tell you they don't like it, but they also can't stop either.
I know it's really hard to get away from that. I always say, because I know my kids are a little older right now, but my mother would always say, get those kids off their phones. And I always would say, unless we move to a farm where there's no cell phone reception, then it's really impossible, because that's the way they communicate.
Right.
And then they use it for school, right? So they're always on their computers. So it really is very interesting. So you share personal experiences in your book and how anxiety in your life help you decide to get into this field and has started your journey. Can you explain a little bit more on that?
Yeah, well, as we said before we hit record, takes one to know one. I'm not out of the blue that I specialize in anxiety. And anxiety is fascinating in that it takes so many different forms for people, whether it's health anxiety. Sometimes it has the OCD flavor for folks. Other people, it's the social anxiety. For me, it's panic and phobias. And phobias are actually the most common diagnosis of any mental health diagnosis. But I have really struggled with emetophobia in my life. And emetophobia, for people who are scratching their heads of like, what the heck is that? It's a phobia of vomit, which is very niche, right? But for me, it has been so debilitating, where it has stopped me from going different places, restaurants, bars. Like, you will never see an emetophobe get drunk. Like, we just don't do that because we don't want to throw up. And it honestly was getting to a point where I didn't want to have kids because I was so afraid of the morning sickness of kids vomiting. And so I really was seeing, oh my gosh, this is taking over my life. And for someone who doesn't struggle with this, they could be hearing this thinking like, girl, get a grip. Like, what's wrong with you? But anxiety is not logical. It's not rational. And
Right.
we ourselves can tell you how maddening that is.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was such a wake up call of like, look, there are things that I value in my life. I do ultimately want to become a parent. I am not going to let my anxiety stop me from that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm really passionate about helping folks live meaningful lives, even with anxiety. And I'm very quick to say it's not about making the anxiety go away. That's a huge misperception people have. It's about learning how to live with the anxiety and not letting it stop you. So doing that work myself and now having a 14-month-old son, like I feel, I don't know if I'm allowed to drop like a little curse word or not. You can edit it
Yes, you
out.
are.
Yeah.
I've never felt more like a badass because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not living under the thumb of my anxiety anymore. And that's just so liberating. I'm still anxious sometimes, but it's not dictating how I live my life any longer.
Oh my God, I want to like rewind that, record it, and play it over and over and over again. That hit so many strings. Like, because I know somebody very close to me who has metaphobia too. So I understand that completely, and like the debilitation and just like the lack of experiences that they allow themselves for exactly that reason. That they have had the same diet as long as I've known them. Stick to the same things, right? Don't change a lot. Like have routines, and yeah, debilitating anxiety when that change is approached. So this, yeah, everything that you said, I was like, yep, 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 yep. Oh, that, yep, that too. It is. It controls so much of your life, including your professional development. Like there are things that you will see that trigger your anxiety in your personal life that will, like, the same triggers can get created in a professional environment. What do I do if I can't perform, if I can't do this, and sheltering yourself from around, allowing that growth opportunity to grab you and move forward. I am very inspired by your story, and I'd love to dive into your knowledge of anxiety a little bit more, and specifically that impact on learning, since we're here L&D. So can we talk a little bit about how anxiety affects the ability of millennials, Gen Zers, even just sufferers of anxiety in general, to learn and develop new skills in the workplace? Like what can this really do that they can't, that they have a lack of control of, that contributes to their performance on a day-to-day?
Oh, I mean, it encroaches in so many ways, but the biggest is avoidance. Anxiety and avoidance are like best friends. And people think that it's keeping them safe, right? And in a way it is. What's really tricky is that it feels so freaking good in the moment when we avoid. It's very comforting, but it does not help us grow. It does not help us expand. And ultimately, it's the biggest confidence killer because every time we avoid, we don't show up for that meeting, we don't ask for that promotion, we don't go to that conference, it reaffirms for ourselves, oh, you can't do it. And so I'm very much a behaviorist as a psychologist because the brain skews very negative and the brain will tell you all day, you're not good enough, you can't handle this. If this doesn't go well, it's going to be an utter disaster. And so you really kind of have to override the brain. That's why positive thinking doesn't cut it. I'm sorry to say. You have to behaviorally take action, even if you are shaking in your boots and you're uncomfy. Because when you take action, that's when the brain finally then has to buy in and say, oh, you did give me the hard evidence that you did show up to that meeting. You did go to that conference. It maybe wasn't easy, but that's how you build that confidence with time. And that's one of the best ways to work through imposter syndrome too. Behaviorally show yourself that you can do the things that your brain is telling you that you can't. But avoidance is a hallmark sign. And so if folks are noticing that they're giving themselves excuses, or that a classic is like, well, I just need a little more time, I'm not quite ready yet. No, you're ready. Like, let's do this. Let's go.
A very good point. I know we've had a lot of employees that have avoided flying to go to conferences that have been important, including myself. After 9/11, I know we were speaking about that earlier. It took me a few years to get on a plane again, but like you said, I had to force myself to do it. And after many, many times, I feel comfortable. I mean, I still don't love flying, but I feel okay flying. So, but
Mhm.
I could see that that would be something that holds people back as far as phobias.
Yeah, that exposure to
Yes.
prevention is key. And something like that, people Google all kinds of things, but Google, like, what are the actual stats on the likelihood of this happening to me? And that can help it put it in perspective too.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right. When you look at the facts in that way, it really does open up perspective. I think for a lot of people that I know with anxiety, it becomes the what if versus, right? So there's, I'm not trying to reverse everything, but this is where my brain goes. Is I was like, well, statistics exist for a reason. There's a pro to every con, there's a yin to every yang. So there's going to be a point in time where they're going to need somebody else to add to the statistic. And I am scared that that would be anybody associated to me or myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
Right.
and not to get too dark here, but that's kind of the problem, is that we run away from the painful realities in life a lot. I talk
Yeah.
about this towards the end of the book because it's like, oh, let's not dive right in with death
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah.
But for a lot of us, like, that's really what this boils down to, is a fear of loss. And in American society in particular, we are so avoidant of loss conversations and grief. And so much of anxiety is actually connected to grief, like the fear of how would I handle this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my work is helping folks come to terms with the fact that pain is inevitable
Right.
and we will deal with it when that day comes, rather than the anticipatory anxiety of
Right.
all these potentials, right? But those are, I say that's like therapy level 5 because
All right. I'll reel it in.
I don't want to start with that day
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But
No, but yeah, I appreciate that tidbit of perspective because I do. I think that that's, it always comes down to the either or, and like, you want this, but what if it's that? And so how does that impact productivity and performance then in the workplace? Like, is that the main root of the problem? Is that if it's this, we're great, and if it's that, we're not? And how, like, I can't be responsible for that. That's crazy. Like that's a stressor. How, what do we do? What strategies exist that leaders can implement to help their employees like manage this anxiety and feel supported and not compromise any output?
Right, exactly. Because the avoidance can be a factor, right? But for other folks, it turns into perfectionism. It turns into this all or nothing. For other people, it's the procrastination, which is its own form of avoidance, right? I'm all about embracing the both and here. The dialect, this comes from dialectical behavior therapy developed by Dr. Marsha Linehan. Look it up. Amazing clinician, amazing work in that space. But it really is about embracing the nuance that there are both ands to everything and that there are in betweens to everything. A lot of times with anxiety, it does feel all or nothing. It has to be perfect, or we start putting the shoulds on ourselves. I should be better. I should be at this certain place in my career. And I feel like I'm a failure, right? If I'm not. And really giving folks more credit of like, hey, did you make a 1% improvement? Did you do a little bit of progress? And giving ourselves credit for that rather than being so hard on ourselves. This is where Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff, her work has been so groundbreaking, right? For teaching folks to be kinder to ourselves. We can get so hard on ourselves in the workplace. I especially see this with millennials because we are very much the achievement generation. Like, we grew up where we so associate love and worth with where we went to school, what job we have, what house we have, basically all the BS numbers in our life. Like, that's what we base our worth on. And so millennials in particular, Gen Z, not quite as much. we've had to like reprogram our whole brain in terms of how we see our value as human beings. And that absolutely shows up in the workplace too. That is a major place of unlearning that I think we're still working through.
It is so great to see that this topic is finally being discussed. TTA is 30 years old, and it's really interesting being in the learning and development area and not having anybody talk about this until like the last, like probably 3 or 4 years, like after COVID. Then we started having partners reaching out to us, telling us that they had really good programs on mental health and wellness. And I know we did a few here and they were fantastic, but as they're very short term, or a lot of them are short term. So I would love to like open that up more to like, what are some other things? I know just like in our culture, one big thing that I always like to do is I do not want anybody to be stressed. And I know stress is a natural. We're all going to feel stress, but I always say we just do our best, nothing more, nothing less. And we like to have fun. We like not to take things so seriously. So I try to have more of like a fun environment because I just feel like that definitely relieves stress. But what are other things that companies could do to address and help their team?
I am such an advocate of generational connection. I think that's been something missing, that mentorship component. And you see this especially with Gen Z. There's so much social anxiety for our recent college grads. Like the idea of talking to someone they don't know, leaving a voicemail.
Unbelievable.
They almost don't know what
So
that
true.
word,
It's so funny because
So
I don't
true.
I don't even know this. Like,
Oh, no.
this is eye-opening for
Oh,
me
yeah.
because for me, the buck stops at millennials, right? It's like, maybe that's a problem is like, I'm
Yes.
like, what's come before me? And I'm like, okay, yeah,
I
after
know.
you'll figure it out like I
Yeah.
did. I'm becoming a
A
Gen
different,
Xer
yes.
all at the same time, but I don't even know that. I would
Yeah.
think it would be the opposite because at the way you said it, that there's like, they find less value in things that we kind of realize aren't where you should hold your value. So I don't know. I guess maybe I'm feeling there's a disconnect there, but
Well, I look at my son who graduated college last year, and they are the most antisocial like generation.
yeah,
It's unbelievable. It really is. It's just it's
yeah,
very unnatural, especially he had a couple years of college where he had to do remote. And
right.
and then one year they went back, they had masks on and
Yeah.
their seats were 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
All
So they're not talking
activities
to
were
anybody anyway.
canceled. I know. So they
Yeah.
already had this whole thing with communicating through social media, not making phone calls. Like they would rather die than make a phone call. It's true. Like I'm not. I mean, I feel that way now too.
I know, right?
It's like, oh my God, I'm not going to
if I
call.
have
I'm not going
to.
to call and order that pizza. If they don't take it online, I'm not going to call. And now we have this whole generation. So
You
yeah,
don't want to
Yeah,
know
it's
how
very
many of my
interesting.
clients, their homework is to call their grandma.
I'd
Seriously.
love.
yes, I could see that. I really can.
No, but
Yeah.
I really like to help. Oh, my lamp. I hit my lamp. Let me start that over. I really like to help folks get more comfortable talking to people they don't know, especially since, I mean, there's such a rise of entrepreneurialism with younger generations, which I love. I'm an entrepreneur myself, but you have to be a major networker and not be afraid to put yourself out there as an entrepreneur. And so that's where there's this juxtaposition, right? Where you see this increase in social anxiety, and that's where behaviorally we have to get more comfortable talking to people we don't know. And that's going to help us come out of this loneliness epidemic that we're in too. I mean, I often say with the pandemic, anxiety for young adults actually went down in the beginning for a lot of them because it's like, oh, I don't have to talk to people at school. I don't have to give a presentation. I can turn my camera off all day.
Yeah.
And people felt that in the workplace too. It was, oh shoot, I have to come back in and like put on pants. Like
No, you're not even joking.
really hard for me, or dating, all these different things, right? And so we kind of really, our social muscles atrophied during the pandemic. And so we've had to pick the weight back up again and get stronger. And quite frankly, I think we're still in the aftermath of that.
Yeah. I would definitely agree. I think every day the circumstances for which we kind of re-engage different types of interactions that we used to have are changing. So you get used to one thing and then they're like, oh, you're going to do this. And you guys used to do it that way too. Like, right. Yeah. It's, you go through phases of it all. This is, I feel like so many listeners are going to like connect to this and be like, that's me. That's me.
The mentorship piece is huge. And then there are times to not just talk about mental health, obviously May being Mental Health Awareness Month, September being Suicide Prevention Month, World Mental Health Day, October 10th. There we go. Those are kind of the three biggies that I see corporate hit, making it more of a year-long experience, right? And honestly, this is a very simple act, but more self-disclosure about our own practices with mental health. Talking about how we go to the dentist, I've got a therapy appointment today, right? And normalizing these conversations about our own practices that we're doing, because there's still a lot of stigma that people feel about, especially in the workplace, about needing to ask for support. I see this especially for my male clients too. We need to just normalize these conversations, and managers leaning into these conversations, asking how people are really doing. You look at studies with Gen Z in particular, they have in their minds that their managers are not going to be supportive of their mental health. And so if managers can really take that step to say, hey, I want to know how you're doing. Here are the resources we have available. And then getting feedback in real time. Are these things helpful for you? If not, how can we create better resources? Really being collaborative. Because we know Millennials and Gen Z, we're not the most hierarchical folks. Like, we want everybody to have a seat at the table. And so hearing Gen Z, what they think about this, I think is a really good thing to integrate.
That's great. So many of our listeners are in training or teaching positions. How can they integrate this in some of their training?
Well, firstly, get out there and see what's available. Utilize LinkedIn, for example. See how many different providers are out there, vendors who have topics of interest, and ask your employees, what do you want to learn about this month? What would be helpful? Whether it's lunches and learns, I know I'm often coming in with ERGs and speaking with teams that way, really finding out what is the need and how can we provide that need? And then really assessing, okay, did we meet our learning outcomes? What are the results that we're seeing? I know, like in the curriculum that I do, one thing that I'm super proud of with it is that we see crisis intervention skills improve through the roof. And so a lot of people have concerns, managers especially. What do I do if I have someone who's suicidal on my team, or who is showing manic symptoms? How do I handle those things? And so really giving people the tangible tools of this is what you do gives people that assurance of like, okay, I know how to handle this. And then we're not seeing avoidance, which is, we want to avoid avoidance. That's really key. So that's where I would say to start.
Great suggestion.
It is. And I'm thinking about just what you said, where you're like, what do I do when I have an employee who may be suicidal or is having a manic episode? And those, to me, recognizing that I want to use appropriate language are very drastic versions of what you may be handling in the workforce. So it's not something that you necessarily think of. I think if you're not properly prepared for that, it might be like, whoa, what is happening to you today? Right? Mm-hmm. Versus a much bigger problem. So how do you help leaders kind of get out of their own way with that, if that's the problem, and or identify that that's possibly what they're dealing with and how to help it?
Right. Yeah. And first, it is building awareness of what are these symptoms that the person is presenting with. And I always turn to the 4Ds, and this is helpful both for managers, for employees in terms of their own distress. So the first one is in fact distress. Are you uncomfortable with the symptoms that you're having? Is it bothering you? And as a manager, are you distressed? Are you feeling worried? Is your gut giving you a message of like, ooh, something's off here? We don't want to disregard that. Second, are you noticing dysfunction? Is the person no longer able to meet those expectations? Are you noticing that their performance has shifted from where it was before? And as an employee yourself, are you noticing, oof, I feel like I can't keep up anymore. That didn't used to be that way, and I'm struggling. Also, deviance. And what I mean by that is deviance like on a bell curve. Are you noticing this team member when in comparison with their peers and the expectations of the team, are you noticing that they are struggling to keep up with those expectations? And then the last is D for danger. We've got to normalize that. People get a little nervous with that word, but if you are concerned that someone is feeling unsafe, both towards themselves or towards someone else, that's absolutely something that you have to take seriously. Speaking of the stats, right? You think, oh, that's not going to happen here. And it's very unlikely to happen, but in those worst case scenarios, you do want to be prepared for that. I will say in this conversation around, we mentioned suicidality, manic episodes, psychosis, things like that. Something like mania and psychosis, fairly rare, about 1% of the population experiences those things. But I will say, you will see people on your team, almost everyone at some point struggle. And the biggie is some form of grief, whether it's a pet passing away, someone struggling with fertility issues, they've had a loved one pass away. Grief is one of the biggest things that we see happen in the workplace, or a really painful breakup, or someone going through a divorce, all these different things. And people don't know how to talk about it. And I always say, be a human first and an employee second. And if we can make room for people's humanity and show that we care about one another's humanity and that we're not just robots clocking in, we are going to see such a shift in the workplace where people, I mean, one, they care more because they feel like they're a part of the team, but just basic kindness coming back to that. We all deserve that compassion. And I think that would radically shift the workplace for folks.
And you really have to make sure that people feel comfortable talking about this stuff.
It's
One
true.
of the examples you mentioned is fertility. And I know I've had countless friends, family members, and employees that have had issues with that. And that is just like you're in such a horrible state for so long. But I think a lot of times the employee would not feel comfortable sharing that information, because it's just so hard.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's something that you don't know about unless it's you. Like that experience is different for everybody. They all are.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's why what you're saying, Dr. Lauren, is what you look out for, and having the 4Ds and seeing, having a guide to kind of mimic things, and at least say, if I feel a certain way about one of these 4 things, I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to see where this is at. I think even that as a step 1 prepares people for so much and for reinforcing their work.
And in this case, a lot of times if you did have a manager that was a male, they might feel very uncomfortable to approach that conversation.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the strengths of your book is the practical, actionable steps that you provide in there for managing and understanding generational anxiety. Could you share some of these steps that our listeners might find particularly useful in managing their own anxiety?
Yes. So I am a huge advocate of holistic healing with anxiety because anxiety is so somatic. I mean, it affects our gut. When you look at the connection between IBS, for example, and anxiety, all these different ways that it impacts us in our bodies, we can't just heal from the neck up. And Western medicine has been very cognitively focused. I love cognitive behavioral therapy all day, but I think we have been missing a very central component of treatment, and that's looking at our gut health, really looking at our body's health. And so number 1, get your blood work done. That is an easy takeaway, but a very important one, because a lot of people can spend thousands of dollars on therapy. And if there's something off with our gut, our vitamin D, magnesium, B12, I could go on and on, we're missing a huge piece of data. So start there. This is Your Brain on Food by Dr. Uma Naidu is an amazing book on this. I love her work. And so think about what's going to be most helpful for you. Get curious about your approach. I list over 100 different integrations of therapy modalities that can help folks. And it may look like traditional talk therapy, but it may look like going to the chiropractor. It may look like acupuncture. It may look like hypnotherapy. And this is coming from somebody very much had evidence-based training where, I'll be honest, a lot of those things are kind of poo-pooed. But if it is congruent for you and you feel it is healing for you, it's great if a journal is backing that up, but I think we've got to take more of a client-centered approach. And if that feels restorative in your healing, rah, rah, go you. That's what matters. And so my job, I believe, as a clinician is to provide people the resources, the toolkit, and then you get to pick up the tools most helpful for you.
That's fantastic. And I believe a lot in that too. I was actually diagnosed with Crohn's many years ago, and I changed my diet. And guess what? I did not have Crohn's. I think I was more celiac intolerant. And my doctors actually argued with me on that for many years. So it really is amazing. I follow a lot Dr. Mark Hyman, who's actually located a lot in the Berkshires near us. We actually have an employee whose father actually works for him. So yeah, no, which is really, really cool. And I know he does a lot of studies on that, but it really is the gut and brain and health connection is so powerful.
I feel like we are just at the tipping point,
Yes.
honestly. I think there's going to just be a continued explosion of research in that space because food is medicine or not so much.
Right.
Absolutely. And all the stuff that's coming out now with all the preservatives and additives, which we've known for a while, but thankfully they're talking more about it, about all these products that are banned in other countries.
Yep.
And yet it's a staple food in our country. It's just amazing when you look at all that stuff.
I know. It really is. I mean, I will credit my naturopath all day with helping heal my panic attacks. So
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of different things that people can pick up, even when we look at how alcohol affects anxiety and things like that.
Yes,
absolutely.
No, it's amazing. And that's one interesting thing I know we were going to talk about as far as what gives us hope for our millennials and Gen Zs. One of the big things is they're not drinking alcohol as much. The non-alcoholic industry has grown so much in the last decade, especially the last few years. It's amazing. And that's how my son, who's 23, very into health, he has no desire to drink. And a lot of his friends are like that now too.
Yes. I'm all for the mocktail movement.
They're cute, right? They have some good ones.
I know. It's really interesting. So we're gonna have more mocktail happy hour at the company. But
I love it.
So as we are ending this podcast today, before we get to the extra fun stuff, what type of work do you do when you work with corporations? What do your programs look like?
Yeah, so it's everything from keynotes. I do a lot of virtual, hybrid, in-person programs. I was over at Boeing a few months ago at Salesforce, 23andMe. There's so many different teams I love to work with. And so a lot of it is speaking about anxiety and helping teams work through that. We also do online curriculum as well. We do book clubs for people with generation anxiety. I love talking about different recommended reads for people. And then we do mentorship circles for people too, to really bring in different generations, different perspectives of wisdom, really crossing the aisle. I think that's important for generations in the workplace to connect in that way. And then also have my private practice. So I see a lot of folks who are thinking about different career changes, who are looking to make a shift or just trying to find more joy in their work experience too.
Fantastic. I condone the work that you are doing and the difference that you're making, because even just the conversation here has been enlightening to understand that people are not alone and that things can be done and that there are a lot of options. And don't let those multiple options give you anxiety, because I'm one of those people too. It's like, well, then how do I choose? You empower yourself. And I think knowing that you have the ability to make change is the first step in knowing that you can progressively make yourself better professionally and personally and not let anxiety bog you down. This is like awesome, Dr. Lauren. And I can't wait to make it even more awesome as we move to the TTA 10.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
It's the TTA 10 final questions for our guest.
All right, Dr. Lauren, I got my 10 questions in front of me ready to ask you. We're going to put 90 seconds on the clock, answer them as fast, as quickly, and instinctively as possible. And we will celebrate you at the end with a little ditty by David over there. He's got some good ones. So are you ready to get started?
This is amazing. Let's do it.
All right, David, countdown, please.
90 seconds on the TTA 10 clock, beginning now.
All right, if you could create your own holiday, what would it be?
Oh, National Donut Day.
Who's your favorite cartoon character?
Little Mermaid.
What about your favorite holiday?
Valentine's Day.
If you could have any animal as a pet, what would it be?
Oh, a sea otter.
What would you name them?
Puppy?
What's your favorite food?
Oh, chicken schnitzel.
Who let the dogs out?
Old McDonald.
What?
Way too many kids' songs these days.
Right. What is 6 + 2?
8.
What is your favorite way to settle your nerves at the end of the day?
Hot bath.
Who is an actor that you will always go to see their movie in the theater?
Julie Andrews.
Fabulous. 10 questions asked. David, I feel like we've got some good results coming our way here.
Yeah, it's a first round knockout because Lauren has a time of 59 seconds.
Whoa!
Wow. Well under.
She is a champion of the champions.
Blew him away.
Absolutely. And so we do have, I called up some West Coast rappers. I thought that was appropriate for Lauren, and they put together a little song about Lauren, and it goes something like this.
Heart that glows. She's a therapist.
Let me take that right back to the beginning. From the top, boys. Okay, here we go.
There's a traveler on the middle healthy road, Dr. Lauren Cook, with a heart that glows. She's a therapist, a guide with a suitcase of cheer. Her joy will hang over you like a grand chandelier. From sunny California, she's got a mission to bring mental wellness to every condition. With science and love, Lauren, we see ya. You're the bold young lady from Pasadena. Oh, Dr. Lauren, you bring the light with your wisdom and warmth. You make things right, whether workplace or home is your situation. Tackling anxiety for a whole generation. The key is to unlock our fears with CBT, eggs, deep, and a mindful cheer. Empowering teams for grace is perennial. Helping Gen Z and those annoying millennials. She speaks on leadership, the power it holds. Fostering connection as the story unfolds. With neuroscience and a smile so pure. Anxiety is a disease, Dr. Lauren's the cure. At hardship, psychological, she weaves the threads of empathy, compassion with a gentle step. TikTok and social media can breed some fear. How to help, Dr. Lauren says, hold my beer. With a touch of UCLA's golden glow and the wisdom of USC's flow. Facing fears, Dr. Lauren's the GOAT. Even if a metaphobia is stuck in your throat. So, God with her evidence and love, we stand with pride. From workshops to talk, she's providing the steam. Dr. Lauren, you are simply a California dream.
Wow.
There
That's
you go.
You're gonna be playing that for your baby son now at night.
My mind is freaking blown. Wait,
It
can I have
is.
that?
That's your theme song. Yes, you
I
can.
have to share that. That
Yes, you will be provided with a
that?
copy.
I feel like I just watched a magic show.
A little bit of me, a little bit of the robots out there.
Very impressive
like it.
and very impressive footage, Dr.
Yeah.
Lauren.
That was so nice. And, wow, thank you. Dang.
Thank you.
This was so much fun. Jocelyn and Maria, I love your vibe. Like, such a great show. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
It's been a true pleasure having you.
For more information on combating anxiety in the workplace, visit us at thetrainingassociates.com. See you later.